This is update for December 11, 2024, day 1022 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up since, I believe, December 7th. I'm going to start with macroeconomic update, and then I'm going to switch to situation on the battlefield in Ukraine and mention a little bit situation in Syria, but very little. So first, let's start with China. What's going on there? As I mentioned many times before, China is moving along. So China is not falling apart, despite uh, you know thinking in the West that China is going to collapse. It's not. It's actually, in some ways, I would say China is rebuilding itself, preparing sort of for the next move, and by that I mean economically, because it's very clear China refocused on export-driven model that works, and China earning um, at wealth. That's just very simple, and I want to support this. So you can see exports in November they grew, imports are down. So this is from this export-oriented model. This is ideal situation because you want to increase your revenues, decrease your expenses, and then your net income is going to be higher. So and that reflects also this positive trade balance, which is, and I apologize, it's missing dot here. It's 95.7. It's not 957. So apologize for that. But roughly, it's the same. Actually, a little bit better as in October, where there was a huge jump in export, as you can see. It's obviously that's 12.7 is very clearly unsustainable number. So it would be strange to expect that this will continue. 6.7 is something more realistic, and even that probably overly optimistic, given where the world is going. But the more important part that China is not only growing its revenue, but it's also managing to squeeze expenses. So this really means that exporters of raw resources from around the world, they have to give China concessions, and that's really kind of like a key position where you can charge your consumers more, but then you can squeeze your suppliers, and that's really what China is doing right now. And so they just so far, because this the other part of Chinese economy is this consumer bubble, including real estate bubble, that is slowly deflating. It's not, uh, mm, it's not catastrophic decline. It's not quick. It's slow. So, but it is a huge sort of amount of bad debt, or basically bad expenses that out there that probably will linger for quite a while. But at the same time, it doesn't sink the ship. And the more important that Chinese leadership switch to something that actually long term is going to work for them. And that really means that in the long run, China is going to be stronger. That's where they will have this drag from all of this bad debt, bad expenses, but eventually it will clear itself over time, and then you have very strong export-oriented engine. I don't mention that China is obviously retaliating about the U.S. with blocking all of these exports to the U.S. the strategic materials. I'm sure that U.S. and West already stocked up inventory of those rare earth metals. So for some time it's going to be enough. But the problem is that if West decides to mine it, mining projects take a significant amount of time, and giving also red tape in the West, that becomes pretty much infinite amount of time that it takes. So I would say strategically, China is repositioning itself and repositioning itself to be stronger down the road. Now let's switch to the U.S. The debt is actually didn't grow this time, but it's growing like out of control. Let's put it this way. Um, and I just want to, sorry, uh, very quickly when I mentioned about inflation. Inflation in the US is not going down. It continues at least at the same pace. As you can see, core CPI, it's 3.3 versus prior period also 3.3, and even just sort of CPI, like May number, actually went up a little bit. So this really means that this CPI, the difference between core CPI and CPI, and this CPI includes what is called volatile groups such as energy and food, which obviously are important, and this is the most important parts for everyone. But somehow there is a view that if you remove those, that's going to be more informative. This core CPI, you know, it's irrelevant to basically how it's presented. The key point is that inflation is not going down in the US, and there is signs that it's probably sort of reviving. And this is related to the reduction in interest rates in the US by central bank, which again, this is basically a warning sign from further reductions of interest rates. At the same time, central bank in the US is also caught in a difficult situation because there is, I wouldn't call it real estate bubble, but I would say looming real estate collapse, and not so much this is not residential real estate, but commercial, because there's a lot of empty buildings, and that is floating rate short term. It needs to be pretty much quickly, I would say 3, 4, 5 years needs to be refinanced, or 10 years, and there's a lot of that needs to be refinanced. And if the rates stay where they are, most of that debt will have to be defaulted or restructured or whatever, but essentially there will be losses for the banking system. And so that's a difficult situation for the US central bank, where, okay, if they reduce interest rates, inflation goes up, there will be sort of, I would say, popular problems for the most of the population, obviously, because that's destruction of the purchasing power. It's essentially transfer of wealth, where most of the population will pay for this commercial real estate problem. So they will be forced to cover those bad debts and bad expenses. And that's really the dilemma that's U.S. central bank is facing. We'll see where it goes. I think there is a meeting in December. So we'll see if they will have. So basically, they have pressure from financial community to reduce rates. At the same time, then they know that if they do, inflation goes up. So they will have political pressure from population, which may really play out negatively in terms of, let's say, limiting independence of the central bank if this inflation spirals again out of control, the way it did in, let's say, 2022 and part of 2021, because that's already sort of repeat mistake, right? The first time you probably can get past, and they did get past. Second time they may not get past, or I would say probability of not getting past increases considerably. And so it will be interesting to see how they, what will be sort of, which force is stronger, let's put this way. But the more sort of problem area is the fiscal situation in the US, where I think head of Treasury Department admitted that this is not sustainable. The only question that she was basically overlooking this problem, never raising any, never mentioning that this is a problem. Now that she leaves, she's basically handing over hand grenade to whoever is going to be new replacement for her. And the new administration will face tremendous problems fiscally. And so let's actually look why it is. And this is data for this is chart for November of this year. You can see the deficit just for 1 month is 367 billion. That's and just for 2 months is October and November, it's 624 billion. This is really big number just for 2 months. And I mean, if we do just run rate, it's um, 3.6 trillion of deficit. This is really absolutely unsustainable. This will lead to tremendous inflation and basically problems. And just to give you an idea how bad these things are, so if U.S. were to significantly reduce or cut this deficit, uh, even completely stopping spending money on healthcare, such as this is Medicare, it's part basically this is two parts of healthcare, and even stopping paying on net interest, it wouldn't help essentially, and you cannot really, well, I guess you can, but that's going to be default. I think that would be the last place where U.S. government will stop paying. So it really means potentially painful cuts in national defense, other areas, but the other areas are fairly small, and even maybe income security. So this is really becoming a huge problem to the point that um, in some ways that U.S. military may get defunded significantly, where it's not going to be capable of much, and in some ways it gives victory to China and Russia without really shooting a single bullet. So this is really a big problem, and it's actually looking at these 2 months, as October and November. This really means that it's not going to be 2 years or 3 years. It looks basically, if this is continues, this is going to be some kind of problem probably towards the end of next year, and big problem where really there's no solution to it, with exception of significantly cutting these expenses. um, you know that's a really realistic solution here. So again, what this really means is that new administration is going to have a tremendous problem, and I would say that it's still unclear. First of all, their economic program is still absolutely unclear. There are some mentioning of certain things, but that's just could be misleading statements. Let's put it this way. So it doesn't sound, based on that there is a clear vision how to deal with this problem. Let's put it this way, because one of the ideas that's being floated is reducing taxes, which obviously will decline its revenues. And in general, it's a great idea. But the problem is then when you heavily indebted and in very difficult situation, it's really gonna put I call it more gasoline into the fire, essentially. So and that's probably part of the reason. I think there was a tweet by incoming U.S. President stating, like, if you invest $1 billion in the economy, in some productive areas of economy, you have no problems with red tape. This is a very populist solution to really problem that's not solvable by populist solution. And the more important part is that this is actually destroying level playing field for everyone, and this is going to be very destructive for the economy, actually, because the economy really grows fast and strongly only if everyone has the same rules. Doesn't matter big or small or middle size. And there is clearly not understanding how important um, small businesses and sort of this businesses that call it crossover from small to medium size, because that's the sort of feedstock for future large businesses. And if you keeping basically red tape for small and this, let's call it medium sized businesses or medium small, uh, this is not going to help with anything. This only will help to enrich small group of people at the expense of the entire society, and it won't result in anything. Actually, Ukraine exactly was practicing that approach for since basically gaining independence in 1991, and it's absolutely destructive policy that leads to creation of this oligarchs in economy that who then basically parasites on the rest of the society. And again, this indicates there is no vision, no understanding economically how to solve this problem that U.S. is facing, and this new administration is going to face it pretty soon. And part of the reason nobody wants to touch it because, as you can see, it's healthcare, right? So if there are cuts to healthcare, there will be extremely negative popular um, blowback. The same if, let's say, social security, it's basically pension system, you cannot cut that either. I think income security is probably unemployment system. I mean, veterans is self-evident, and the rest is just too small. It's not going to help to solve anything. So we really need to focus on these big items. And again, there's no clear solution. And this dozer it's more like it doesn't seem like they have also a clear understanding what to do, because it's more of a sort of like, oh, we found some kind of entertaining waste that the government does, but it's not going to move the needle. It's entertaining for population, how bad this mismanagement is, and so on. That's probably good from this showing how bad things are. There's no question about it. But the real actually problems are in the biggest problems that really need to be resolved are in these areas of healthcare, essentially. And so, as I stated, there will be very difficult choices there. Then I want to mention a little bit about Syria. So the key perspective, sort of the key, I'd say one of the key, obviously not from I guess from Ukrainian perspective, will Russia be able to negotiate a deal with the new government in Syria to keep its naval base in Tartus, which is here, and basically keep its military presence in Latakia as a general. This is this region of Syria, which Russia absolutely wants. There's negotiations going on, and it's still unclear how things are going to play out. So that's going to be key item there, and also mentioned that Israel's invasion into Syria, I think, is I would say, in the long run, it's probably going to be a mistake because this really reunite a lot of other countries who will have very negative reaction to that, and also fear that their balance of power will will sort of shift and shift into favor of Israel in very extremely negative way for the most, and so they may just be compelled to act towards Israel negatively. Now let's switch to situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. As a summary, things are going sort of typical trajectory in very negative, I would say, very negative trajectory for Ukraine. And I want to mention another item about this mobilization, because there is a lot of, as you've seen, pressure from the West to mobilize, younger population between 18 and 25. And I mentioned before that that's not really a problem, and the same, it's not a problem of the equipment. It's problem of motivation, and I just want to explain why. Ukraine actually currently has enough soldiers in the military to actually stop Russian advances. The problem is that they are not motivated, and some of them deserve simply, those from the front line, but there's also, I don't know how you call it, like covert the desertion, where significant number of people are simply stay in the rear, let's say, 10, 20, 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers from the front line. So basically, it's like call it administrative overhead that's completely overbloated, because everybody goes there, so they don't end up on the front line, and that's even sort of bigger problem in all of this. So if this is truly organizational and motivational problem, and it really comes from Ukrainian president, that's a root cause of all of these problems. So it's not going to solve the problem by more equipment or younger generation. Again, just want to kind of explain this situation. Now I'm going to do a walkthrough in a clockwise fashion, the way I always do, starting from north, and we're going to jump into Kursk region of Russia. Things here continue to develop in a negative way for Ukraine. Russian forces continue slowly but surely to squeeze Ukrainian forces. They even managed to cross Russian-Ukrainian border in this area where I'm showing. It's unfortunately cut off. It's nothing sort of major, but just kind of like show off. Okay, we also can get some Ukrainian territory in this area, but basically this bridgehead is gonna be lost, not quickly, but not in a distant future. Let's put it this way. Now let's move to situation north and northeast of Kharkiv. Things here remain more or less stable since, as you can see, June of this year. Nothing really major happening here. Now let's move to North Lugansk front line. Things here also, I would say, relatively stable in a sense that there are no big advances by Russian troops. They do move forward, so the front line is not stable in absolute terms. I would say it's stable in relative terms, meaning that there is no huge losses for Ukrainian side here. Now let's look at the situation on the North Donbass. The northern part is fairly quiet, not much going on there. The southern part, the only fight is truly where there is sort of significant fighting, is this brick factory in Chasiv Yar, where Russian troops already captured half of it. So once that lost, there will be significant movements here and significant territorial losses for Ukraine. And most likely it's coming. Maybe it's not going to be quick, but it's getting there. Now let's move south to the most critical section of the front line, where things, I would say, borderline catastrophic. So again, the most important is now this sort of Russian breakthrough south of Pokrovsk and in the direction mostly sort of northwest, to some extent west. And this is the most dangerous development, but there's always some kind of dangerous developments, let's put this way. Also, Kurakhova is essentially at this point not defendable. It's agony for Ukrainian forces there. But let's look at a little bit at the more detailed map. So as you can see, Russian troops continuing their movement south of Pokrovsk, and they managed to basically little bit expand this spear between Novotroitsk all the way to Novoalenivka to make it sort of more stable, so that they can continue advancing west and also northwest. There's quite a bit of talk about this coal mine here north of Udachna. This is where that coal mine is. It's actually coking coal, which is used to manufacture steel. And this is the largest, well, let's say, largest and last remaining supply of coking coal, because the rest of it was lost in Donbass. So there is quite a bit of conversation that really that will collapse steel production in Ukraine, which is important source of foreign currency and basically supporting economy, supporting war effort. Obviously, Russian command, Russian political top pushing in that direction, so that this mine is no longer supplying Ukrainian steel mills, which are at this point mostly on the Dnipro River in Dnipro and Zaporizhya region, and also Kryvyi Rih. So again, and it's, as you can see, it's not that far away. I'm sure that this is at this point a top priority to interrupt supply of this coking coal for Russian troops, not even so much as Pokrovsk. This is a little bit, 4 days ago. So as you can see, there are some advances. The front line is completely not stable, and things developing from bad to worse, let's put it this way. This is south of Kurakhova. Things here are a little bit more stable. I would say Russian troops did not manage to make significant advances here. There's more ground lost in Kurakhova, but overall, this whole situation here is undefendable, let's put it this way. So this is gonna be lost. Don't know how soon, maybe before New Year, maybe shortly thereafter, but this is already sort of done deal, let's put it this way. Now let's look at Zaporizhya front line, where things stable, nothing really happening. The reason for that is because Russia does not have enough resources to put pressure everywhere. So they also stretched, and it's not that they have tremendous amount of resources. They, again, as I stated, they very stretch as well. And if Ukrainian forces were in better shape motivation-wise, they would be able to stop Russian advance. Because at this point, it gets to that level that Russian troops barely use any heavy equipment, meaning tanks, because there is shortage of those. It's essentially infantry versus infantry. Not even so much artillery has lesser importance. It's really switching to kind of man versus man type of situations, and also UAVs are critical, and this gliding bombs, and that's in some ways the warfare somewhat shifted giving that both sides are super exhausted. This is not because sort of naturally, because it's better choices, it's forced choices on each side due to lack of resources, and that's what's happening there. Now let's move to next section, which is along the Dnipro front line, and things here are quiet. Nothing is happening here for the same reason as other quiet sections of the front line. And this is Kryvyi Rih, which is the main manufacturer of steel in Ukraine. There is also Zaporizhya, there is Dnipro north of it, but that's essentially, call it like this, remaining triangle, steel-making triangle in Ukraine. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye-bye.